We've got Amy Boyer and Lindsay Douglas with NRCS to discuss GIS basics, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. Amy, you're still muted, I think, if you're talking.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
I was listening to you to keep me muted here. But as I was just turn on my video for a few minutes here, I was seeing lots of people's names I did not recognize. So I think we probably have a lot of new employees on the training here today. As Tim said, this is geared toward our beginner ArcMap user. We want to get everybody started here. So if you are from areas 2 or 5, this may be a repeat. We have done these sessions live in area 2 and 5 over the last year and a half. We had some great turnout, a lot of really good questions. But we did want to do this again for all of the people in other areas and all the new employees we know we have had hired here over the last year. So our main goal of the day is for people to be able to know where to get data, to be able to make some useful maps, and to be to the point that people can start using the NRCS engineering tools for some of our hydrology applications. I know in the past sessions we have ran the ARC tools there to be able to do hydrology. We are not going to do that here today just because of time restraints. Many of those sessions took about 3 hours. We don't want to keep anybody on there this long today here. If there is a need for that and you want a live demo of running those tools, we can do that here in the next couple months if people find that useful. Just get to me or Tim if you would like to see that happen. So to start out today, we are going to go to some different websites and we're going to show you where to find data to be able to load into your ArcMap project. We're going to go over how to set up a new project. We are going to go over playing with the legends and some of the properties to be able to manipulate some of that data that we're adding in. It doesn't come in a form that you always want it to. We're going to merge some rasters, and then we're going to do some basic troubleshooting because ArcMap can be a finicky program and you're bound to have a few errors, and it's good to be able to solve some of those very basics. So I'm going to turn my video off and start sharing my screen. Okay, so does everybody see my child up there, I guess? So we're going to go to the internet here. I think one of the most important sites that we probably get a lot of our data from is probably the OGRIP site. If you're not already familiar with this, is definitely a site that you need to be. So you can just type in OGRIP and it comes right up here. Probably want to tag this as a favorite because you'll probably be going back to this one over and over again. So once we're on this site, we just go to service data, the spatial information, and infrastructure downloads. And we will have some cheat sheets of how to get to some of this stuff. So you don't need to write everything down today. You can take a few notes, but most of the things we will have step-by-step information for you to download here probably tomorrow. And why do I have a white screen? Okay. So this is what's going to first pop up when you get into this website here. And we're going to see a whole list of tabs going across. So this is probably the main site where we're going to get aerials and we're going to get our LiDAR information. So you can see that it's blank here, but if we click on a county, and I will click on Fairfield County because that's where I am today, and you will see things actually do populate across the bottom. So right now we're at a county level. So when we look at these aerials, the Mr. SIDS and the different ones, these are going to be quite large. You can see they're going to take a significant amount of time to download. It may be useful to do the whole county, especially when it comes to the aerials. Unless you have a really good computer, I probably wouldn't recommend doing any of your LiDAR at a county scale. But what you can do is you can zoom in closer, and as you zoom in, you're going to see that we have some much smaller tiles that pop up. And at this point, if you click on a smaller tile, you're going to see that our options change. And this lets us download aerials and LiDAR at a much smaller portion there. So when we're doing LiDAR, this is probably the route we need to go. So we obviously have the difference in the TIFF and the SID, and I'm not really sure what the difference is in all those different aerials. I just choose one and they all look the same. But the grid file is the one that you want to choose when we're downloading LiDAR. So make sure you do choose that one. And I'm not going to download today. Now, when we download, the one thing I really want to encourage people to do is, before you start downloading any data, is, as I was saying, ArcMap is not always a happy program. It likes data to be in one place in a very organized manner and doesn't like the location to ever change. So I would recommend that you have, say, a GIS file, and then under that GIS folder, have some different folders for downloading. I cover a large area. I have a folder for each county that I cover. Information for that county, I put it in that folder. Obviously, many of you are only in one county, so I would still put my data in just the one folder. Lindsay is going to talk about some other folder things as she goes forward with some other stuff as well. But the OSIP-1, so this was the original state, I guess, funded flight. These were done in 2006 and 2007. Depending on whether you were in the northern part of the state or the southern part of the state. And then we had the OSIP-2, which was done in 2013 and 14. So those are slightly newer aerials. The quality of those seem to get a little bit better. And now we have what's called the enhanced. So I'm going to zoom back out to a county level here. So if we look at the enhanced, you can see that some counties are highlighted in pink here and others are not. So the counties that are highlighted in pink paid to upgrade their aerial photography. So those are much crisper, clear things to download. And if we go back, click, you can see that we have the 1 foots on the OSIP-1. Those are the standards that every county got. And then you can see the 6-inch. Those are an upgraded one. So if we go to other counties, you can see that they only have, Perry County next door only has the 1 foot. So they did not pay for the enhanced 6-inch one. Same thing for the OSIP-2. You can see some counties did not upgrade. Fairfield did not upgrade. I'm trying to think what county did upgrade. There were a few that upgraded. Their Hancock County looks like they upgraded to the 6-inch for that OSIP-2. And then we had the OSIP-3, which you can see there were lots of options for upgrading in that OSIP-3. Now I'm going to pull up this here because you can see this is when these flights were done. We had them done from 2017 to here just this year, so the different years. And I have not heard of when we have another flight. I'm going to assume new flights will start here shortly, but I was not seeing any of that information on their website. But going back to going back to where I was here, you can see that the standard, with the 1 foot standard, we had 6 inches. Some counties even went to a 3 inch. And then some counties did a combination of multiple things. So if we zoom in here a little closer, you can see, it looks like Franklin did all kinds of options. They did the 3 inch, which is going to be your tightest pixels, and those are going to be your clearest imagery. Fairfield County did a few different ones for different parts of the state. Looks like we have some Northwest Ohio's that also did that 3 inch imagery, so it really varies throughout the state. Now you can see parts of mostly Area 3 and part of Area 5. Those were done in 2020, so those people have not received all their new aerials yet. Typically, these aerials are flowing in that March, early April timeframe right before planting. And then the company that does that does all the processing of that information. And then typically in past years, those have normally been released in that October timeframe. I'm guessing with the COVID and everything this year, that's just delayed. So I'm going to assume in the next couple months that if those people in those counties keep checking back, I'm going to guess that these are going to be populated and you're going to be able to get some new aerials here very shortly. On down through here, we also have things like center lines, address points. These are fairly up to date on some of these. I know some counties, the information that you get here is pretty dated. This is not where I would be getting this information. We have much better sites to get newer information for these layers. And then we also have the USGS quad triangles here. If many of you have been around, you probably have these big sheets in your soil and water office. I'm going to guess they're at the very bottom of a flat file. Many districts sold these over the years, but they're the 1 to 24,000 scale. When you look at these things, this is how we used to draw a lot of our watersheds. So it's going to really make you appreciate the LiDAR information and stuff that we have today. I probably would not be using these if I did not have to. So is there any questions regarding this site that anybody has? Nope. Okay, well then let's move on. So the next site that I really like is ODNR site here. So they have a new site. So if you have not been here lately, you're going to find that things have been moved and they have buried some of their GIS stuff a little deeper than it once was. And I'm going to have a hard time finding this. Let's do. ODNR GIS here. Okay, so you may think you want to go to the GIS mapping and services. That is not where you want to go now. You want to go to data and records. And then we are going to slide down and go to the GIS metadata downloads. This site has wonderful information that we can use for some of our conservation things. And what I'm going to recommend that you do is search by county. So again, I'm going to search by Fairfield County. And I'm not going to do by category because I want everything that they have for that one county to pop up for me. So it's going to pop up all the different data that you can get for that county. You're going to find that from county to county, some of these really vary. But some ones that I would recommend you downloading that are going to become very useful, obviously, is the 100-year floodplain. We obviously try to avoid putting projects in a 100-year floodplain. If you're in the urban sector, you're obviously not going to do building in the 100-year floodplain normally. Some of the aquifers are also really good things to download, especially when we're going into southeastern Ohio where we're doing a lot of the grazing plans. We don't always have an abundance of water. So say, for example, we have a pasture that we have 100 cattle on, and say they need 20 gallons a day. That's a lot of water. So if we can't have 2,000 gallons is what we're going to need to provide for them. If we're going through the waterworks, it's saying that we need to provide that in a 4-hour time frame. So that's a lot of water to have. And some of these layers here are going to give us broad, I guess, spectrum of how much water that we can expect to get in a territory if we drill a well. So if I have a well that can only produce, 1 or 2 gallons per minute, I may have a problem if I have 100 head. And that's going to make us think, is drilling a well really a good practice, or should we be looking to try to get some rural water or some other source of water for those? So if you are in this eastern part of the state, I do recommend that you do those. We also have the detailed watersheds. That's a very good layer to have as well. We have our floodways. One of them I really want to highlight is the groundwater pollution potential. If we're doing any project with manure, we're supposed to be providing a map in our design file. This is also called the drastic. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail on this one later on when we actually download that, and we're actually going to play with how to do the legend to make that look appropriate. Now, one thing to realize is not all counties have a digital version of that groundwater pollution potential. There are hard copy maps available through ODNR if you don't have those digitally. Unfortunately, they used to be very easy to find, and now that they have changed the website, they've become a little more of a challenge. So we will get that out to you of where to find those now, because when I was looking for them, I was having issues. Other things that are good to know, if you're in an area that has a lot of oil and gas wells, it's good to know where some of those are. Other flood hazard areas, especially if you have a lot of flood control dams, you're also going to have a layer like this. Obviously, we have our Surgo soils is what we should all be using. We have the water well locations. So when people drill a well, they either have to, their driller has to either register that with the state, which would go into this site here, or they can register with the county health department. In that case, they would not go onto this GIS layer. So this is not comprehensive of all wells in an area. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go to next door Perry County here, because you're going to find you're going to have some slightly different things on this site. So here we end up getting a lot of abandoned landmines. If you're in the southeast, those are probably things that you want to have, because oftentimes when those are reclaimed, they end up as grazing ground. And so we end up with a lot of those in EQIP applications. And obviously the soil is not quite the same, where we're pretty much putting topsoil on top of bedrock. And so we're going to have a lot of other issues with developing that ground, and we want to know what that is ahead of time. And you will see this one, if you look through this list, you're going to see that Perry County is one of those that does not have that groundwater pollution potential in a digital form. Now let's try a northern Ohio. We'll do Hancock there. They had nice aerials. How did it go over? I did not hit select. So again, we have some reservoir data. Typically when we have some big reservoirs or lakes, we will find that we have information on some of that. That looks like what most of this information is. So I think as we go northeast, we tend to have less data as far as some of the ODNR things, and that's sometimes a good thing, sometimes not. Okay, so let's move on. Another site I like is the Ohio TIM site. That is the Ohio Department of Transportation. They have changed that a little bit, but you can see we have some data downloads. Sometimes some of these are a little more for the curious. We have what's considered assets. One thing to realize when we have, when you download things off the PIM site, when you download things, you're getting information for the entire state, not just your county. So you're going to have, if you just want to cut the information down, you're going to have to do some geoprocessing of that information. And we will go over how to do some basic geoprocessing to be able to get that to much smaller unit. We're going to want to clip that stuff to our county boundary. So again, useful things, they have road inventory, they have bridge inventories, which are always good to have. They have the culvert inventory. It's always really good to know where some of our culverts are, especially when we start using the NRCS engineering tools, where we start showing where some of those culverts are. So again, this is only going to be on state routes because this is an ODOT site. A lot of your county GIS sites will have some of your county roads and possibly some of your township roads, depending on which county that you're in. Other than that, in this section, I'm not sure. There is a lot of other ones that are all that useful. We have the boundary ones. This is where a lot of these are really good because we have the city boundaries, township boundaries, county boundary, because obviously we may need to do some clipping. But first, before we do clipping, we're going to have to isolate your own county to do that. And I think we're going to show you how to do that here today as well. If you're someone in an urbanizing district or whatever, and people come in, you know, when they're buying house lots or whatever and want advice, we can also get some school districts and some other information from there as well. We have some road information. I'm not sure this is stuff that we really need for any of our conservation work. Again, projects probably aren't something we need for our conservation work, but if you're ever really curious of things going on in the state, you may want to check that out. And then we have the environmental level, which they've really reduced what they have on this. Prior, they had a lot more information here, so this is not quite as good as it once was, which is really disappointing because this is where I got a lot of my information. So some of this we're going to have to be able to get to other places, because somewhere, let me pull this up, I do have a list of what they used to have. You can see it's really changed. This is what was on that site a year ago. This is where I had told people to get some of their HUCs, especially if you're a watershed coordinator person, where you can get your 8, your 10, your 12, your 14, and all of those different things. So we will find you a new source to be able to get hard copies of those if you do not already have those. Although the EPA site, if you go to their site, they have a really nice interactive thing of all the HUCs, where you can see the larger HUCs, and as you zoom in, you can get to the smaller, or the smaller HUCs and the smaller portions. I was on our Beehive thing there the other day, and I noticed that they also have some of that same information there. So, and that was also an interactive one. So we obviously can still get a hold of this data if you want to be able to make your own maps. Okay, so those are, I guess, more state-oriented ones. I also encourage a lot of you to get a hold of your NRCS folks. NRCS has a lot of layers. Some of those are taken from some of these. They have the clue layer, which is a wonderful thing when we start doing curve numbers for watersheds. That is an FSA layer that really splits out some of the land uses. I'm not really sure what the real protocol for distributing that information. Some counties give it to their soil and waters, others will not. So if anyone really knows whether they are or not, aren't supposed to, I guess we should know, but I encourage you to at least ask for it. Now, one of the other things that we always need to look at is what information does our county have? We have some counties that have great GIS departments. And one of those I've always been a big fan of is Fayette County. For a rural county, they have a really nice site. Most of those, I think, are under the auditors or the engineers departments. I know at least one county that the GIS department is actually under the soil and water. So it's been a while since I've been to this site, but let's go. Oh, so this is some of the things that they have that's available for downloads in this county. Typically, the more urbanized county that you have, probably the more data that you're going to have, especially if you're in one of those MS4 type counties. But you can see that some of these things are things you would have seen on that ODOT site that they've already trimmed down to the county level for you. One of the things I love about this county is they actually paid to digitize all of those old sheets in the office from the 1938 through the 80s. Many of you probably in drawers and flat files have those little sheets of those old aerials, but these have been digitized and orthoed to actually overlay on the GIS layers, and that is wonderful. I think a few counties are starting to do that because these are so nice, because you can never have too many aerials. You know, I like to be able to find tile systems and different things through some of these aerials. You can also see how land uses have changed over the years. When I've been doing permits for stream bank stabilization, the EPA on the permit or is going to ask you how much earth you have lost on that stream. So you can, I always measure from an old aerial to a new aerial from a time frame, and you can say in this time frame we have lost, you know, this many cubic yards of dirt. So aerials are very important. We have all kinds of great things here. So check out your local county's website. I think most counties have those at this point. Think what other layers, and I'm sure all of you have other data layers that you go to for different things. I feel that these have probably been the most useful ones that we have. So I think we're to the point we probably want to go ahead and move on to setting up a project. And I am going to stop sharing my screen. And Lindsay is going to start sharing hers because her computer runs GIS much quicker than mine does.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me? Thought I'd just say hi for a second before I start sharing. Like they said, my name is Lindsay Douglas, and I work for NRCS as a civil engineering technician. I am not an expert at GIS, but I know quite a bit. I've been using it for probably close to 8 years now. It's a long time. So I can help you guys troubleshoot some of your issues and help you with a lot of the basic things we use day to day. So I'll start sharing my screen here. 1 second. Can you see it? Good, okay. All right, so here's a map that I made really quickly, but before we get to this stage, starting a new map. You've never opened this before. You're gonna see something pop up like this and your screen is gonna be white behind you, which I actually have one ready here. So it'll look something like this. And since I have a lot of maps that I've made over the time, they show up here in my recents, but assuming you've never opened this, it's only gonna have your blank option. So just go ahead and click that and say open and say okay. And you're gonna sit here and probably wait for something to load and nothing's ever gonna load. This is how it is. Like Amy said, you have to download a lot of data before you even get to this step. ArcMap is just a way to view the things that you have downloaded. A good first step that I recommend is you want to come over here to your layers and you're going to go down to properties. I'm sorry.
We got a few people in the chat saying they can't see the screen.
Okay.
I can see it. Is there Is there a large number of people that can't see the screen? It seems like maybe most people are seeing the screen. So
Okay.
Abby, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's going on your end. So go ahead, Lindsay.
In these
Okay.
large meetings, sometimes it takes time before like the image gets transferred to everybody else on the call.
Okay, so I'll try to move slowly and not too quickly. Okay, so in here, you're gonna want to go to here, hold on, let me back up. So you're gonna go to the layers over here in your table of contents, go down to properties. And here you've got several options. One of your biggest ones you're gonna use for your layers is the coordinate system. It's good for this to be set before. We're not seeing this? Okay, hold on. Hold on, I might be presenting wrong. Let me get back here. Amy's telling me it's not looking the same. Give me a second. Sorry, guys. Hold on, I got several things open. I want to stop presenting. Okay, and then come here, Amy. Can you show me real quick?
Lindsay, you're getting those mixed messages again. It looks like
Okay,
it was,
yeah. I'm sorry, guys. Can you see? It should show like my Teams screen, and okay, I think we're working now. Okay, you see a map now.
Yes.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. This is my first time presenting on Teams. Alrighty, so here's the blank map that I was starting with. So we'll start back over here. Here's a layers tab here under your table of contents. It's really good to come to your properties. You just right click on it and it will show up. Click on this and then you're gonna have your coordinate system tab. I recommend setting your coordinate system before you add anything to your map, because some of the layers that you're adding do not all share the same coordinate system in the background. So what this will do is it makes sure that all the layers you're adding are formatted the same way. They're going to be showing up the same way based on the coordinate system you want to use. If not, if you forget to do this step, it's not the end of the world. You can always add it later. However, the first layer that you add to your map, it's going to assume its coordinate system. So for us, most of the time we use these NAD 1983 state plane, Ohio, north or south. Now I have them saved in my favorites so that I don't have to go hunt for them every time. I highly recommend this. I'll show you how to do it here in a second. These will not show up automatically. You have to go find them your first time. And then every time you get a new computer, you'll have to do this. So you go down to your projected coordinate systems, state plane, then it's going to be the NAD 1983 US feet. And then you just go scroll to your state, which is down here somewhere. There we go. So you would just select this and say okay, but before you do that, I would go ahead and hit this star here to say add to favorites. That way you don't have to go hunt for it every time. If you forget which folder it's hidden under, you don't have this all memorized. So I'll do south for today and say okay. Now it didn't really show anything, it's just because it's all running in the background. Now we would be ready to add data. So I already went and I have a lot of information. Oh yes, hold on 1 second. I do have something that Amy's telling me to show. So if you don't know what which coordinate system to use, this is a good map right here. These counties down here are your south and these are your north. So depending on what county you're making your map in, that's what coordinate system you'd use. 70 is a good general the road 70 is a good general guideline. That's about where it's split. But those of you who are close, this will help you decipher. Or if you have multiple counties that are in both, you know, you flip back and forth like I do. Alrighty, so here's where we would start adding information. I always go up here to this icon and say add data. There are several types of things that we can add. You have layers, shapefiles, and rasters. That is the majority of what we use. Shapefiles are, they are showing you visual information as well as holding information in an attribute table. So this will show, like for a road, it's going to show the line of where the road exists. And then it's also going to have almost like an Excel table hidden in the background that's telling you what its name is, how many feet it is, how long it is, and information like that. Based on whoever made the information is what's in there. Some of it isn't relevant to us, but a lot of it's pretty useful. So a lot of times I like to add, so my ortho, which would be my picture, so my aerial photo, it's a raster, which means that it's a grid that holds information within those boxes. I know this is getting a little bit complicated, but that's what a raster is. It's pretty simple. I wouldn't mess with any of the colors or anything later because it is a photo. So add that and it'll show up here. And then it's, if anybody's ever messed with Photoshop, it's kind of like that. You're just adding layers to your cake. So I've got a clue layer, and everything that you dump in here looks pretty ugly unless it's a layer, an actual layer file, this .lyr, which means that it's got, what a layer file is it references the shape files that you have, except it's got visual information tagged to it. So every time you add it, it's going to look exactly the same. So for this road, I'll add this road layer. And it's chugging here. So you can see that some of the roads are actually thicker than others, and they're different colors. It's because someone at some point told it, this is how we want it to look. We want the major roads to be bigger and darker than the side roads. So every time I add this file, it's going to look exactly the same. Whereas my clue layer, which I turn on, is this beautiful Easter egg purple color. If I were to add that again, since it's just a shapefile, it's going to be a different color. Like it just randomly picks things. So you can edit this and manipulate it. It's not the end of the world if you don't have a layer file. And I'll teach you guys how to manipulate those. So I'll remove, also to remove data, you can just right click on it and just say remove. That's a handy thing to know too. So I don't want my clue layer to look like this. It's not really helping me at all. So you can either click on this and change its colors here, or you can right click and go down to properties. This gives you a little bit more freedom with changing how the symbol looks, especially if you're trying to do something special with it, as in you want to sort by category. So there's a lot of unique values in this. So this is referencing our attribute table here. So let me actually back up again. This is how you get to your attribute table. I am a right clicker. There's other ways to get here, but I right click on the layer and this is my main hub. So I open my attribute table and I have mine tagged over here. If not, it'll come in the center more like this and you can expand it. Bear with me, it's chugging a little bit. I think it'll let me make it bigger. So this is everything that's running in the background. of my clue layer file. I know not everybody gets access to these, but this is the one I have and it's super handy. So you can see here we've got like our county ID, but then we also have our track number and our farm number. Obviously, those are the two that I'm going to use the most. A lot of this is coded information based on whoever created the file. So the things that I'm going to use the most are our track number and farm number. And most shape files have that. So if I were to do the roads, it's opening. Here we are. So a lot more coded information, but then we've also got here like the name of the road. So that's going to be important to us. That'll allow us to label it later. So for the time being, I'll do the quick change here for our clue layer because it's driving me crazy. So I'm going to make it, the fill color is, I want to make it hollow, and then I'll make its boundary yellow for the time being. Make it a size 1 and say okay. So that changed how that looked. If I were to go back here, we can go to, we've got several tabs that I use all the time. The display tab. So you can change the transparency of something. So if I wanted to say, even if this was a solid color, if I had left it as a solid color and say, I want it to only be 50% transparent and say, okay, wait for it to load. See, it's a lot lighter. A better example of this is if I were to do, wait for it. So my community shapefile, which is my townships for Pickaway County. You see it came in as this funny color here. If I wanted to go in and change the transparency, I could do that again and say, I want it to be 50% transparent. You say, okay. You can see things through it, which is nice. Another way, if you have things hidden, you can go ahead and drag them in your table of contents and want to change what layer it's showing up on. So if I wanted my photo to be all the way at the top, I could just drag it to the top, but it's going to cover everything. So it's not really useful then. Back in, so back to symbology, kind of got distracted there. If I were to go to categories, say I want each township color, I would go in here and say unique values. These two are, features and categories are the ones I use the most, and then unique values under categories. There's a lot of, you can play with it and manipulate it however you want. But when you start here, you say either add all values, or if you're only wanting to show certain values, you would do add values. For here, I'm going to do add all values. So it's picking every township and making it a different color. So, and this is based on its ID. And then I can go to a color ramp. And this is where I would just change however I want it to look. For now, I'm just going to leave it. It's going to be a nice, crazy Easter egg explosion. But so now I've got different colors for each unique value. So far, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Another tab that's really important in this layers property is your labels. And it's going to be slow, bear with it. So here's how we're going to have labels pop up on our map for any layer. You have to check this box. If you changed everything you wanted to in this area right here and didn't check this box, it's still not going to show up on your map. That way you can turn labels on and off pretty easily without deleting the whole label group. But if you changed all your labels, you can't figure out why it's not popping up, this is a good indicator. You need to check that. So for this one, this is based on that attribute table it's referencing again. I'm just going to do name. And then I'll change the size, say to a 12. You can change the font and the color. I'm not going to for this. And then you just hit OK and it will pop up. But before I leave, I just wanted to do a little hint here. So if you ever have a map, say you use all the time for when customers come in, and you want it to have information on there, but when you're zoomed out, you don't want it to be so cluttered with labels you can't see what you're seeing. You can set it so that certain labels show up at a certain scale, and you would do that through here. I won't mess with, it's pretty self-explanatory when you get in there. There's not a whole lot of options, but I won't mess with that right now. Then you say OK. Wait for it to load. I'm going to turn off my clue layer so it renders faster. So the more information you have on your map, the more it's going to take for it to load. So now we've got our labels here for our town. There's a lot of ways to manipulate how things look. You can go into the layer property and kind of tinker with them. You can't really mess it up. It's just changing how it's viewed through your map. And if you have more questions, you can always ask me later, but that's pretty much the basics on your layer properties, changing the way things look. So one problem that we have a lot of questions about is when we get broken links. And here, I have another map that's actually made. That looks a little better here. So something that happens sometimes is we'll get a red exclamation point next to our layer, and it will be like a grayed out. You can't select it at all, and it's not showing up on your map. This means that you've got a broken link. And I can actually go and purposefully break one. We'll see, hold on, how that will. Actually, let me just show you what it looks like. I have like a little cheat sheet here. That'll probably be better than actually just going and breaking one. So it'll look like this. It'll be grayed out and have a red exclamation point. To fix it, you're just gonna right click on it, go to data, and then this won't be grayed out. Let's say repair data source. You would click on that, and then you would just go find that file again. A lot of times this happens when you have moved information, like your shapefile, into another folder on your computer, and when your map wasn't open, and it doesn't know where to find it. It's just it followed the same path that it found it before, but it's not there anymore. So you just have to tell it where it is, and then it should repair itself. So I recommend, if you are going to be moving shape files or anything like that, I recommend moving them through the catalog, which can be found here, and mine, it has it tabbed over here as well. But so when you look at information through your catalog, it's showing it to you like this. Now, if I were to look at it in my Explorer, if I navigate to the same spot, I'm seeing this. So each shapefile and layer and raster has multiple files related to it, and they all have to work together in order to function properly. If they get separated, then it's not going to work correctly, and it's going to be really difficult to put them back together and make it work right. So I don't recommend moving things through here if you can help it. I'd recommend always doing it through here. It functions just like your Explorer. It's just in a GIS friendly mode. What else do we need to talk about? So I briefly mentioned attribute tables. So I'll open my attribute table here. And I only want to deal with, say, a clue chunk from a project that I'm working on. There's several ways to select from an attribute table, or even select at all. You can do it in your map. It's chugging. Okay. So if I zoom in here and say I'm working on this farm, this 1592, I can go in here and select each one, or, and here's how you unselect, or I can go into my attribute table and select from there as well. Either by, it's misbehaving. Here's how you sort your attribute table. So if you wanted it sorting ascending by your track number, you just right click on it and say sort ascending. I guess that's a handy little thing. So I want to go down to this 1592. I could go like this and select them this way. Like I'm just clicking and dragging at all these. Or I can come in here and say, I don't know where it is on the map and I'm trying to find it. I can say select by attributes. And I'm going to go in my query builder. This takes some practice learning, but most of the time it is, so you're going to double click. I'm trying to find a track number. So I'm going to double click equals. You're going to hit unique values. It's going to come up with every value that's possible for a track number. And instead of scrolling down, I'm going to type it in 1592. Double click this. And if you're not sure it's going to work, you can always hit verify and it will tell you if it's working or not. But then you can say apply and see it selected it for you. Now, I don't want to have the whole clue layer in the background. I just want this piece to show up on my map. And I want to work only with that piece. I can actually extract this from the clue layer and make a new layer from it. And Amy had mentioned before, you can do this with your county layer. I tried to download the county layer here this morning and it was not behaving. It would not extract from the zip file, which can happen sometimes. But most of that information comes in a zipped form. You have to unzip it, uncompress the file before you can use it in GIS. But back to extracting this from a layer. So I have it selected. I can go back to my table of contents and I'm going to right click on the layer that I'm extracting it from. And then I'm going to come down here, data, export data. So now this is going to, I'm going to change where it's going. Usually default to the last place you had things. Hopefully this works. Something about GIS. It gets really finicky about file locations. So this may fail on me, so we're going to try this. So I want to say export. And renaming files is really important. That way you know what it is you're looking at later. You may remember that export to is this at one point, but then when you have export 10, you don't know what the difference is between them. So we're going to say this is track. This may not work. 1592. And you say save. So to update it here, just be careful. I'm gonna see. Okay, it's working. And it says, do you want to add it to your map? And I'm gonna say yes. And it went ahead and threw it on my map. popped up on my auto. So this is what I've got now. It's separate. I can turn off my clue layer and it's still there. It's a separate entity from that clue layer now. And say I wanted to clip my soils to this layer. That's something that I do a lot. You can to this new shape that you have. So say you ran a watershed and you need to know what soils are in that watershed. You know, you could use it that way, or trying to think of something else. Some people do ditch petitions, and you're wanting to know what clue or what properties are within that boundary. We would do a clip. In order to do that, I'm going to add my soils layer to show an example. And of course, it looks terrible. Anything it defaults in here, always they pick the worst colors. Say red. Just changing the way this is looking. Okay, so I've got several different soils within this boundary. I use clip all the time. I'll just mention that. That's definitely one I would keep in your toolbox of things to use. So in order to use clip, you can get to it several different ways. We've got geoprocessing, which is like a shortcut of things that are used a lot, which they're hidden up here, or you can go to the ARC toolbox. So the ARC toolbox is full of millions of tools. I don't know how to use all of them, but there's a lot that we do use. And most of the time, I don't know exactly where things live. So you can, if you remember where it is, a lot of times it's in data management tools, or what's the other one? Analysis tools. But if you can't find it, don't freak out. Just go to the search tool. And then you're just going to say clip, maybe. Search, and it's going to bring it up for you, which is nice. There's several different versions based on what they're used for. Maybe it's making a fool out of me. Okay, here we go. Here's the normal one. So in order to use the clip tool, you're going to put in, if you're not sure which pieces go where, I recommend having your show help over here. It's pretty handy. So this is telling you, if you click in this box, it's going to tell you the feature to be clipped, which would be our soils. And it's going to check on me. Okay, so what I did was I just click and dragged it from my table of contents. It's a lot faster than finding it through file system, but you can also do a drop-down box. It's just there's several ways to do it. So now this is going to be where we put our new clue layer that we extracted. And then it's going to give us a file location, and it's saying it's putting it in my default database. I'm going to change that so that I can find it later, and I'm going to put it in this GIS training and say soils clip. If you ever have a tool fail on you, a lot of times I would try changing your file name first. Like I said earlier, it's very picky about file names. It doesn't like special symbols or spaces. Some tools work with spaces, some don't. It's very finicky. So it's thinking.
How about a question in the meantime?
Yes.
So you, on that, in the clip tool that you pulled up, it says input features. And
Mhm.
I'm looking through where you dragged from the pick away soils, which I think that is a layer. So can you talk
Ye-
about layers versus features, maybe?
Yes. So features, you could also, so they call them layers over here because it's like layers of a cake. Layers over here. Sorry, I'm pointing with my hands, not my mouth. You can't see me. So in your table of contents, I call them layers because they're like layers of your cake, and also, I mean, up here, let's call them layers. There's also layer files, which are assuming they are the .lyr. They have the information. So you can put both of those in there and they're both going to work. So it's just saying put whatever, it's using another term, saying feature, whatever use to clip. The only thing it's not going to work on is rasters. It will use layers or shapefiles. It won't use rasters. You have to do a special raster clip. So you can come in here and tell it you're trying to raster clip. So there's ways to, this one is for, it only clips a raster. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Features can include more things than just layers.
Correct. Yes, I guess that's a more concise way to explain it. Thank you.
Hey, Lindsay,
there
we had a question from the chat. Was how do you know which layer to put in input or clip? Is there an easy way to remember?
So here, let me open this again. So in the input, that's why I like having the tips, the hide help, or actually it's show help open. So input feature is going to be your cookie dough, and your clip feature is going to be your cookie cutter. That's the way I remember it. If you put them in the opposite way, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just, you're not going to get what you thought you were going to get, if that makes sense. You'll probably just get something that looks like the square for the track again. I guess, did that answer that question well? But I always remember as like the dough versus the cookie cutter, but that's how my brain works. So. Okay. So it went ahead and added it to my map here. And of course it gave me some ugly thing. So I'm gonna change it. We're gonna make it blue, so you can tell. So here's the new soils that are based on just this track. Okay. Ooh, another tool that I use a lot, and that you will probably have to use in order to use our the NRCS watershed tool, is raster merge. So I'll go ahead and add the layers that I need for this. Hopefully they work. I'm not gonna do that. Nope. So what that was telling is that was just asking me, there's so much information in those in these are digital elevation models. Let me explain that first. And I'll zoom to it. Here's another trick. So if you right click on it, you can do zoom to layers versus having to go hunt for it. That can be handy. So these are digital elevation models that I downloaded from the OGRIP site. And this is how they come in. There we go. So they're just this gray. You can kind of actually see the creek here. And it's just changing the color based on the elevation. So the whiter it is, the higher it is. And that's just its default. This is probably the only thing that I can think of right now other than photos that comes in the same every time. It looks the exact same every time you bring it in. That is an actual layer file, like I explained before. Layer files they look the same every time you bring them in. So now if I want to run a watershed on this creek here, but technically the watershed's going to cross over into here. I have to join these together for the watershed tool to do that. Otherwise, it's going to cut your watershed off at the edge. They absolutely have to be joined in order for it to understand that. It doesn't automatically take in more than one raster. So I usually just do, I do the search tool a lot because it's kind of hard to find. In here, you can get lost trying to figure out where things are. Actually, I remember where this one is. Data management, rasters, raster data, mosaic to new raster. So like if you don't have that all memorized, you could just do mosaic to new raster and get the same way. But here we are. So if I'm going to smush these into one, I can add them up here. So I like to click and drag. It's just a preference thing. Like I said, you can add them here or, go hunt for them somewhere else. This is helpful if you don't have it already added to your map, but you know where it is in your file. You can do it that way. I don't really recommend it because you want to know what you're working with. So now your output location, you want to stick this somewhere you can find it. If you can help it, I would always change your file location because you want to know where it goes. Don't let it go to default random places. A lot of GIS is staying organized, even though I'm not organized about explaining it, but having your files organized based on projects and keeping things where they need to be will help you out because I know a lot of times you have a million files and you're trying to find the right one and you're sitting there trying to click through them. It can get frustrating, especially when you're new at it and trying to fight with the system. It'll just make your life a lot easier. But that's my little speech on staying organized. So I want this to go in my GIS training. I say, you just click on the folder for this one, you say add, and then here's where you're going to add your extension. So for this one, I'm going to call it Raster. Since I don't have in that file named this, and then it is, best part is I have notes on this, which we will send out, and I still use them to this day. So you're going to want your type to be 32-bit float. So which will be in this drop down. Now I don't know if I can really explain what all of this means, but basically what you're doing is you're matching what's the types that are already in here in your individual pieces. Now what determines that, I can't tell you, but our band is going to be 1. Everything else you leave default and you say okay. And then you cross your fingers that it works. So a good indicator down here that things are working is you'll have a little band and an earth turning and it's telling you mosaic to new raster. That's a good sign. Depends on the speed of your computer, whether it'll actually run like mine did, but it automatically adds it to your map as a joined piece then. That's super handy. Like I said, you will need it if you're going to be using the watershed tool. I maybe once have ever had a watershed fit on just one of the blocks. And like I said, I downloaded those from the OGRIP website that Amy showed earlier.
Where did you learn to do that? Was that trial and error?
That was, I think when we first got the watershed tool, we were having problems. We were like, it's not going past it. And it was just kind of, I think, trial and error and my past experience with dealing with rasters. I knew you could smush them together. What's next? Talk about link. Oh, yes. So in order to run a lot of these tools, like if you just open up ArcMap for the very first time and you try to run a tool and it fails, and you're like, well, that's a great start. A lot of times it has to do with your extensions. So you have to turn them on. Why they're not on to be, don't know. But you can go up to this customize bar up here in the tab in the bar here and hit extensions. And you want all of these to be turned on. So we have ran into it in the past. Some districts have their own licenses, and their licenses don't allow for all of these to be turned on. Now, if you're going through the NRCS license, it should allow you to turn all of these on. It just has to do with your license packaging. But I would just turn them all on, and that makes usually everything work. So there's that. What else? Yeah, that's important. You'll be very frustrated if you don't turn those on. We talked about Raster image. Exporting photos. So if you're using one second here. If you are using AutoCAD and you want to add a photo to the background that's in the exact spot that you did your survey in, you can use ArcGIS for this. I think that's what most people I know use it for. It does a lot more than this, but this is something a lot of people use. So you would just go to your area once you have your image added, and then you're going to zoom to wherever your area is. Then you're just going to go up here, say this is the field I'm working in. I surveyed these waterways. I would just go File, Export Map. And here's the very important thing. We use JPEG, and you have to click this world or write world file. This is what allows it to be georeferenced. Otherwise, you're just adding a photo to randomly into AutoCAD. It's not going where your survey is because it's not georeferenced. So always click that. It'll help you out a lot. And then it should just pop up exactly like it does in here. It'll look the same. Obviously, you have to save it as a file. And then when you add it in, I'm trying to think, it's Map I Insert in AutoCAD. And then you would navigate to this file and select it, which I don't have AutoCAD open, so we won't go there. That'll bog it down really bad. And it makes, so when you click this, it makes two files. If you were to look at it in your Explorer here, because it's got your JPEG as well as the file that tells it where it lives, where it's supposed to be put. And Amy always says, if you're sending her those pictures, make sure you send her both of those files. So that's very handy. Use that a lot. So then I think I covered most everything except I want to talk about one more thing. Making a good map. So here you obviously don't have your normal elements. In order to make it look like it's on a piece of paper, just like in AutoCAD, you've got your model space, and then you've got your plan view. ArcMap has the same thing. So right now we're essentially in model space, which is this data view down here in the corner, or you can go to your layout. There's another way to do it through view. You can go to your layout mode. So now it looks like it's on a piece of paper. And here I recommend you always add a north arrow scale bar at the minimum. And in order to do that, you just go up to the insert tab, and then you've got the north arrow, which you just select one and say, okay, and you can move it. Just click and drag. These lines around it just mean it's selected to be moved. You can even change the size of it and everything. Scale bar. This is handy because if I get into my really like your rules of cartography, you always want a scale bar on your map, because if it's copied or anything changes about it, you can always figure out what the original scale was. So I'll just stick this one in here. And you can modify this too. So you can always go to the properties of it, and you can manipulate the way it looks. So if you wanted to change where the words are, or a lot of this comes with just playing with it and seeing how it looks. There's no law on how exactly it's supposed to look. This is where the art part comes in. You know, it's you know, usually you want to put it somewhere you can see it, and you can put it outside of your actual image. As long as it's within this black line, it will print. And a lot of times what I do is I'll actually move where my image is and kind of have a border to where I put all my information. Another important thing to add would be your legend. And so this, you use your layers. And so you add and subtract which ones you want to show up. So for this one, I just want the roads on there. You just work through the wizard. If it's gonna let me, it's thinking. Let it be called legend. You know, if you wanted to give it a border and a background, say white. You know, all of this stuff is customizable, which is kind of the part that I really like. But see, now it gives you a legend based on those roads. You can manipulate that, change everything. So all other things you can put in here. So there's some dynamic text things. You also got your title. So, you know, if you wanted to say what landowner it is, say Logs Road, because that's where this is. Now put it down here. Another important thing you could add is your current date. So if you're, you know, you have, this will stay standard. If you save this map, it will, every time you flip over to your layout view, it will still be there, like all your legend and your scale bar and stuff. So you can kind of set this up to be your standard map. Say if people come in a lot asking about a specific thing for you guys to look up, say a plot of land, you know, you can put your general things in there, like your scale bar and your north arrow and then the date, and you wouldn't have to add those every single time. And it's kind of helps speed you up if you're trying to make some nice maps. Yeah, but yeah, this is definitely like your arts and crafts part. Probably my favorite part, making the maps look pretty. This one doesn't really, but Amy, is there anything else that you can think of that I need to cover? I know that was very fast.
That was fast. I think we covered most of the basics here. I guess, does anybody have any questions?
Lindsay, we had a question in the chat on, is there a tool to simply draw a circle or just to add simple shapes into a drawing?
Yes, so, and I don't use them very often, so bear with me. You can do where you add a new shape file which you would do this in your catalog. So if you're making something from scratch that you did not download, I would recommend making it through your catalog. So in GIS training, here's the folder I've been using. You would say new, and then you can go down and make it a shapefile, like, and say you want it to be a point, polygon, or a polyline. You'd want to add your coordinate system, which if you have it in your favorites, it'll make it really easy. Say okay. So now it's added it to my table of contents over here, and also it lives in that folder, but there's nothing on my map. So then you would go to editor, start editing. It'll freak out, but you say continue. Basically, it's saying you can accidentally edit other things that you didn't mean to, but then you have to go to editing window, create feature. You're going to click on your new shape file and line, and then you can start. You would just double click when you were done. And then these are all the tools that you can use to manipulate it up here, that, you know, edit your line once you've made it. Here, it's like being really slow. Hold on. And there are ways to draw that aren't in shapefiles, but I recommend using it as a shapefile because that way you can add it to other maps later once you've created something. You know, it lives beyond just this picture. So that's how I recommend doing it. There's other ways. I don't really use it. I can look it up and tell you later if that is helpful, if you would prefer not to make it a shapefile. But the nice thing about this is, you know, you can change it much more easily.
We had another question from the chat asking, can I change the name of something in my legend after I already have it in there?
Yes. Here, hold on. So, oh, hold on, I'm still in editor here. When you're done, you always have to say stop and then save your edits, by the way. So I want to, so you can just go to the properties of your legend and go in here and manipulate it. So if you were trying, it just depends on what you're trying, what exactly are you trying to change the name of? This is the question. So if it's like you want this to be, you don't want it to be called primary major roads, you just want it to be called major roads, you can go in here and edit it this way, and it will update in your legend. There's a lot of different ways to manipulate this, by the way.
Lindsay, can you show the search for tools function that you can use to find a geoprocessing tool rather than searching through the directory?
Yes, so up here, it's this little icon, which I guess it has a shortcut that's Control F. I use it all the time because I cannot remember how to find through the toolbox. I mean, the toolbox is pretty, can be pretty intense. But usually if you get it close, if you can't remember the exact name, it will come up. But yeah, that's located right here. And then I'm sure it's located somewhere else, but that's where I always access it. And you can pin this to your toolbar. I don't know if you just saw what I did, but the little tack, and it will keep it here to the right. It's pretty handy. But yeah, then you would just type in whatever tool you needed. So like buffer, that's one that a lot of people use, which buffer is also in the shortcut up here, the geoprocessing shortcut. And yeah, so, and if you're not sure the difference between them, which I'm not always sure, you can expand this and see what it'll explain it here, you know, what you're trying to do. I actually use the help all the time. But here's the buffer tool. I don't know. Actually, I guess I could buffer the new shapefile I just made and show you guys what that looks like. Do I name it here? I think I do. So then this would tell you the distance you want it to offset. It's very similar to the offset function in AutoCAD. Well, maybe not super similar, but kind of gets the same idea. Say I want 10 feet. You just type it in, and then you can choose how you want it to look. If you just want it to go to the left or to the right or both sides. I'm just going to say full. And then if you want the ends rounded or if you want them flat. So if it's just a line, it'll be like an oval if it's rounded. Like the buffer shape will be an oval. So I'll say rounded. Pretty much everything else stays the same. So down here, it's telling you it's working. I think it worked. Here, hold on. I'm not in the good view. So, and a lot of this is trial and error. Yeah, there it is. It's that beige color. So if you're doing like filter strips or something like that, sometimes that can be handy. Are there any other questions?
One person from the chat was asking about the line you made, if that was a 10 feet buffer on either side.
Yeah, yes, it was on both sides. So that's when I think it said full. When I did the drop down, it'll give you full, left, or right. So you would do left or right of the line. I know that's not a very good description. I don't know why it wouldn't say inside or outside. I guess because I didn't do a polygon, I did a line. If you're doing closed shapes, I recommend doing polygon versus line, because you can see I didn't do very good here at the end. That was just a very quick demonstration.
On the OGRIP website, if you go there hunting specifically for LiDAR data, you'll see the LiDAR data exists in multiple file formats. Is there a reason people should use one over the other for our purposes, or do some work better? Or can you discuss that any?
I would use the DEMs, the digital elevation models, which I'm blanking on what they look like. Hold on one second. Let me really look. I want to tell you correctly, so give me 1 second. So I would use the grid files because, of course, it's downloading. I messed up there. Because that's what comes in as your digital elevation model. I believe the other information comes in, like it's already digested for you. All the other information comes in as like the bulk LiDAR data, which is like a lot. It's a lot of information. It's not processed at all. It's pretty much a million points, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I would definitely, if you're using it for like how I did here in my map, for like this kind of aspect, I would definitely use the grid file. it'll save a lot of space on your computer. I guess another thing I'm going to mention, so I know some of us don't necessarily have the best internet in places, and working off of servers, you know, it can kind of get a little messy with ArcMap. So I have been working in several different counties lately and also working from home. I have tried to use everything locally on my computer. If you have the storage space, especially the files you use all the time, if you can put them in like I have an external hard drive that I put everything on, it saves, like my computer will run a lot faster with ArcMap because it's not trying to go across the internet to achieve finding a file on a server and then pulling all that information back and trying to view it live. That would be your bottleneck in a lot of cases. That will slow it down. So if you can put things, you know, save things locally on your computer. I know not everybody has the space for it. Like I said, I use a lot of external hard drive space. So that's kind of a little troubleshooting tip. I know that was a lot of information really quickly. And you guys are always welcome to contact me if you think of something later or run into something. I always enjoy trying to help people solve their little their hiccups. I don't always have the answer, but I'll try.
Lindsay, we had a request for your contact info, if you can share that, or.
Yes, so it would probably be easier just to, can we email it out?
Yes, I can do that.
Versus everybody scrambling to write it down. I just figured that'd be easier. Like I said, I do have little cheat sheets. I have one that I kind of made for today that I'll probably finish editing it to make it user-friendly. And then we can send that out as well. I have one for the raster merge as well, because I know I did that very quickly. But yeah, I like to put the little pictures of the icons so you know what I'm talking about when I reference, you know, add data icon and things like that. So, but I'm also always up for updating that. You know, we're just kind of doing this to help people out. I'm not an expert, so if you don't understand the notes, I'm willing to update them to help others who aren't as familiar with it, you know, be able to navigate the tools.
Earlier in our chat, Matt Lane, our soil scientist at ODA, noted that several of the websites Amy showed at the beginning of the presentation had soil layers available, but Matt wanted to note that those could be outdated, and the official place to get your soils would be through the USDA Geospatial Gateway. Just one note to make there.
Yes, and when you're running your, I know we did not cover this today. We have covered it in previous sessions where we ran the watershed tool, the NRCS watershed tool, which I'll also mention, you have to add that tool specifically. It doesn't come loaded into ArcGIS. If you're interested in it, please reach out to us and we can help you get started with it. But in order, the soils layer that you should be using for that is the one that's the HSG. It has, it's a version of the soils layer that, let me move this around so you can see. It has your different hydraulic ratings on it. That'll be very important for using that watershed tool. It'll save you a lot of time. So it gives you a rating over here. Not all versions of the soil layers have those.
Does anybody have any last questions before we wrap up today?
That's a nice
Um,
job.
Danielle asked if she needs to download a new soils layer. She says she has OH83. I think it's probably a reference to the geospatial reference.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What was the file called again?
Or she says it's OH_073.
That might be your county code. If she opens up the attribute table and sees if it has the hydraulic group, that's what's important. A lot of them are called different things, especially if they've been saved by other people. Some people shorten the names.
Well, that looks to be all the questions we have.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy and Lindsay, for your time today and putting that together. This recording will go out on our YouTube website, and I'll send that out in an email through the Federation along with some of the cheat sheets and information we discussed today here tomorrow or maybe early next week. As I mentioned earlier today, we're going to plan some more webinars for 2021 and keep an eye out for those coming through. With that, we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.